Professor Jeannie Clockwell, Westcliff University instructional designer, and she will be the one facilitating this how-to series session. It is important to mention that this webinar is a continuation of the Why series that we had 2 weeks ago. So there will be a few things that we will take for granted, if you like, because we had a conversation, almost a 1-hour conversation 2 weeks ago. So thanks, Professor Clockwell, for facilitating today's workshop, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for hosting me, and welcome everyone. And I'm going to share my screen. I did pray to the technology gods, so I'm going to see if my prayer was answered. You have to burn homage to the technology gods to make sure they're going to cooperate. Yes, they did. Okay. All right. And let me see if I can see it here. Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm just going to get started. My name is Dr. Jeannie Clockwell. Dr. K is fine, and we're continuing, as Evelyn said, the discussion on how to boost engagement in online settings, focusing on discussion questions, but I also am going to focus on environment and culture within your online community and how to build that community. I do believe that those are connected, and so we're going to get started. And then after each section I correlated the presentation to each learning outcome, I'm going to open it up for you to either post or think about or give examples of how you would apply this. You don't have to use what I have given you. If you have an adaptation of it, that's even better. I think coming together and sharing ideas is a wonderful way to learn. So by the end of this session, you'll identify how to set the stage for engaging dialogue using online introductions. You'll explore how to set the stage for engaging online dialogue, building a caring community. You'll examine how to set the stage for engaging dialogue by modeling discussion expectations. You'll investigate how to set the stage for engaging dialogue by holding a discussion mini lesson. You'll recognize how to set the stage for engaging dialogue using questions. And you'll explore how to set the stage for engaging dialogues by being diagnostic and applying resources. And we're going to cover each one in depth. And I think for questions, if it's okay with you, maybe we could take those all the way at the end. So if you could just jot them or text them to yourself or whatever, so we keep track, I think that'll be good for time. So the first SLO is to identify how to set the stage for engaging dialogue using online introductions. So you want to engage students by getting creative with introductions, sharing your story in an inventive way, and maybe applying an icebreaker. So I like to always share about myself a little bit and some of my, I like to call them AFGOs, another fantastic growth opportunity when I'm teaching. Because that is pretty much how I've done my research. I base it in research, and I also base it in self-reflective practice. When I first started teaching, I was very task-oriented. I think for myself as an academic, it's like, I've got to get this done, and we need to focus on content. And I had the opportunity once to team teach, and it was a high-level course, it was a 500, but it was the MED I'd written, and students had to literally develop an action plan proposal based in research, similar to like what you would do for a prospectus, right? Well, I'm teaching away, and my whiteboard, it was a hybrid. So part of it was face-to-face, and then eventually I built it completely online. My whiteboard looked like, what was that movie with the guy with the Simple Mind or whatever, where he, like, you go into his shed and he's got all this stuff written. That was my whiteboard. And I'm going and going, and the partner, she was also a Dr. K, comes over to me and says, Dr. K, we're going to stop now and we're going to do an icebreaker. And I'm thinking, what the heck? Like, I've got some important research points to make here. This is a waste of my time. That's what I'm thinking, of course. And so I said, well, okay. So she stops, you know, she says, we're going to take a 10-minute icebreaker, right? And she does this, I don't know, it was some kind of grocery list. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And of course she left me for last. So now I'm really having the thing, oh my God, what did every student say? We had like 30 students. We get done, they took a restroom break, they came back, and the questions were flying at me about the content, about the research. I'm like, what just happened? Like, they're engaged. And after that course, we sat down and the other Dr. K said to me, they were in cognitive overload, Dr. Klocko, and they weren't hearing a thing you were saying. That was such a vital lesson. That taught me that even online, it's important to integrate introductions, be inventive with your story, and don't be afraid to share who you are in a professional way, and then applying those icebreakers for cognitive overload. It's a very valuable experience. So you can engage students by getting creative with introductions. And I want you to know, this is like a sampler. I live in Las Vegas. This is like a buffet. Okay, so I'm going to give you just like, this is our direction, you can go. I understand time on task for online instruction is very intense and it can really cause burnout. I know for me it can, because I'm constantly on. So I'm going to just throw it all out there, and then you find a way that works best for you, for your style, for your approach, for your teaching, and for your time on task. Engaging introductions. You can ask students to introduce themselves to each other by using an emoji. So I found online research and a professor that actually just posted an emoji. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting idea. And then students can guess what the emoji means and why you posted it. You could do that for yourself. Easy peasy, quick post. Ask students to start their introduction, with a quotation. Students can discuss why they chose the quotation. And I often do use quotations at the beginning of my discussions and then actually have them guess why I posted that. You can ask students to start their introduction with a fascinating story, and then asking their peers if the story is fact or fiction. And then you can also ask students to introduce themselves by stating a few fun facts about themselves. So again, when you're teaching face-to-face, this is kind of taken for granted. You wouldn't just all enter the room and, all right, we're getting started. You'd be like, hi, I'm Dr. K. This is my, my dog Molly. I love to hike, blah, blah, blah. Well, I think oftentimes for me, I forget that online is the same thing. I have to build a culture of community. So it is important to take that time to get a community built. And as we're going through, think about how you might share or adapt or do one of these, and you can post it to the chat as your applications. So also share your story in an innovative way. Oftentimes instructors believe that sharing a story about themselves is not professional. However, sharing a story about yourself helps learners feel a sense of community. I'm instructional design, but when I'm designing, it's like I want time on task, easy peasy resources. I really don't want to have to spend hours trying to learn something to integrate into my course. It's not that I'm not open to learning. It's that normally I'm on kind of a schedule in my head of how quickly that course has to get built. So there's Animoto, and they actually provide a video template for instructions, easy peasy. I saw Mystery Virtual Bag. You can create a virtual bag that has items in it that represent you and your interests. So you could post like 5 icons and have students post guesses as to what might be in your bag and what each item might mean to you. You could do a truth or fiction, post 10 statements. You could do 3 statements about yourself, some true, some false. Have students guess which might be true and might be false. This was hard for me. I'm just going to share openly. I am very taskmaster oriented. I was raised like that. It never left me. It served me well. But I have to remember the human portion of the course is just as important to build community. And it does enhance engagement, because then they're not constantly in cognitive overload. The icebreakers, I shared my little story about the icebreaker. There's 21 free fun icebreakers. That link, that is a really cool little site. It actually adapts them for online, so you don't have to figure out, oh, how am I going to do this online? It gives you a little bit of an adaptation right after the description. 2 truths and a lie, and they tell you what online tools you can use: Google Forms, SurveyMonkey, virtual table topics. You can use online chat, discussion board, Zoom. 3 words, that's where you just post 3 words and you have students try to figure out what those mean and why they're connected. That's a chat and discussion board. Same and different, that's online chat, whiteboard, or discussion board. And then big lottery. And the lottery one is where if you told students if you had just won $1 million, what would be the top 5 things or the top 3 things you would do with that money? That might, again, for me, it's like, oh, but I'm wasting time. I need content. That actually increases engagement because students start becoming more comfortable with you and with their peers, but yet in a systematic, structured way. Okay, so that was SLO 1, and I'm trying to be mindful of time because last time I remember, Evelyn, I went over, or almost went over, and then we didn't have a lot of time for questions. So at that time, oh, I see a lot of chats. Does someone want to share? Maybe we can take a few shares of how they think they might adapt that, or how they think they might use that, or how they might be using that now. If someone wants to speak about it a little bit.
Sure. I think you're absolutely correct in as far as being able to personalize it as well. I'm 6'5", 310, so I'm a very intimidating person as it is. So I show pictures of my wife. This is my wife. I tell a story about that. I show pictures of my children. I have stories with that so that I'm just not Dr. Johnson. I'm actually a human being and so forth. They can relate to it. They see my son. They go, oh my God, look at all those muscles. They see all, it just so that I'm just not a figurehead, the talking head on the screen. And I agree with you. I think it helps open them up. They're going to be more open. Like, any leader has to show trust in their people before they will trust me. So this is what I do. So I'm congruent with your approach.
Thank you for sharing that. And who was that? I didn't see who came in and spoke.
It was me, Dr. Johnson.
Oh, hi.
People make comments on my appearance, so I don't appear it.
Thank you. And yes, I agree. Does someone else, and I'm reading all these comments as well, and some of the questions I'm jotting down to address later. Would someone else like to share or talk about how they might want to use some technique? Oh, I like that, ethics. Talk about a time when they got caught not telling the truth. That's powerful. Yeah, the Zoom whiteboard, that is a new option. I just saw that, and that's why I've written that in.
Can I share about that?
Yes.
I am using it all the time. I'm teaching economics. I'm using to draw the graphs and to show the change. And it makes sense to use it because the students engaged in the discussion, and I gave him opportunity to annotate, and he participates with me with these graphs. So it gives the class, makes class more interactive.
I love that.
Thank you.
That is a fantastic. I'm glad that they're starting to evolve where it is becoming easier to be interactive. Does anyone else want to add before we move on? I'm just trying to be a good academic and stay according to time. Time is not my friend sometimes. Okay, thanks everyone, and keep posting in that chat, and we'll try to address those questions at the end. The second SLO is explore how to set the stage for engaging dialogue by building a caring community. So you can engage students through building community by setting course and discussion norms, integrating principles of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and modeling care by reaching out and being available. And again, I like to share my AFGOs because I think it's a powerful lesson. It was for me. So again, because I'm task oriented, when I first built my online course, I thought, I built actually an entire MED. It was 23 courses in all. And yes, I built the whole thing. And I wouldn't suggest it for anyone's emotional or mental health if you have like other projects. It's really intense. Anyway, so we built this, and it was an admin leadership course. And I thought, I'm just going to have them start, sharing about their schools, and just, it's going to be beautiful and sunshine and flowers are going to come out. And these administrators, future administrators, started posting, oh my gosh, I saw in my chat, you know how you get the dings? I'm like getting all these dings, and I'm thinking, oh, something's going on in my discussion board. And I look, and there's like a mini mutiny going on. They're posting about, you know, students that they've had issues with and their courses and their administrator. Oh my gosh. Oh, shut that down. So I immediately go into that discussion after the adrenaline subsided and said, you know, for right now, students, let's put this discussion on pause. You brought up a lot of great points and we really need to talk this through. Okay. Then I really had to think about what happened. And what happened was I never set any type of norms for my course. And again, that same instructor that I taught with when we taught face-to-face had our face-to-face course set norms. And again, I'm thinking, why, they're adults. We don't have to. Yes, you do. It's like, it's really powerful when it comes from them. So I ended up holding a mini Zoom with each group. And I let them set norms. I had a list, you know, I emailed, I did a mass, like, you know, send me your top 5 of norms. I compiled a list so we were prepared for the Zoom meeting. So we're not wasting time doing that. It's like a 20-minute Zoom. We correlated, you know, I correlated their list. They picked out the norms and I used a template. Each group then had norms posted. And that changed that dynamic of venting versus academic dialogue. There is a distinction, and it's important that students learn it. It is good to have conflict and academic dialogue. That's how we learn, but that's different than venting. And then, so we'll go over each one. So again, I shared my story about the norms. It's important to create norms and discussion norms. So you can have a set of course norms. I take the syllabi as part of my course norms. That's a contract. I tell students, this is a contract between the university and you. And I actually used to do syllabi agreements where they would post in the discussion, I agree to the outlined whatever criteria that is outlined in this syllabi in this course. And that was powerful for whatever reason, making them post that they agree. And I had netiquette as part of that syllabi, that if your netiquette is inappropriate, you know, I will need to, you know, talk to you. We have to maintain a safe community and there will be consequences for that. And it worked. They just a simple post, easy peasy. I posted the syllabi, you know, please post your agreement to the syllabi. And for whatever reason, it changed the culture of each course when we did that. Frameworks, I pulled up just again, a couple examples that you can adapt to create norms. You can post one of these to each group, then hold a quick 15-minute easy peasy Zoom session to finalize the norms. And now that they have that whiteboard option, you could use that. You may also have students develop netiquette in addition to or instead of norms. So netiquette is more like, this is how we're going to, the structure of our online culture. To me, norms is, this is kind of my personal culture. And these are just some examples I pulled up that could be adapted. You could put it into categories, and I won't go through it, but because you can look at the PowerPoint on your own, but you can even break it into categories, or you could leave it open-ended. And then netiquette, I just pulled this from ASU, be scholarly, be respectful, be professional, be polite, and it tells you what to do and then what to avoid. And again, this could be as easy as posting something, you know, that you believe is appropriate for that course, and just post your agreement to our course norms. And then in the group, post your agreement to the group norms. And then engaging students and creating the community by integrating DEI. And I took this from New Approaches to Discussion Board. It's building a community of care, let the conversation wander, which again, for me personally, is a little challenging because I always want them to be so focused on that research. And I have to remember that a lot of times that wandering leads them to other research and other solutions. Model what it looks like to be wrong and acknowledge when you're wrong. I believe that's extremely critical and important. I believe that as an instructor, I live by example. If I have a due date for my students, time on task for their tasks should not be, for me, longer than 3 to 4 days. I like to do writing and scaffolding chunks because I believe if I'm going to require something to be due, I don't think for me it's equitable then that they're waiting 2 weeks for feedback and giving good feedback. If I want them to be engaged, I have to also be engaged with their work. And I know online that's challenging. In our MED, we had 30 students, and there was a lot of papers, you know, a lot of writing, a lot of cognition that went into those courses. But I think that that creates that community. Recognize that the right to speak isn't distributed equally, make listening visible. So make sure that everyone has a voice. Sometimes, as you know, and in that admin leadership course, I learned, it was amazing to me that those upcoming admin leaders were very vocal, and I loved it. But on the same hand, I wanted to make sure that the students that weren't as vocal got that chance as well. Engage, okay, and then engage students through building community by modeling care. Privately email students when they seem to be struggling in their discussion posts. What I did is when I started teaching in that big MED, I actually created templates for all my emails. I know it sounds crazy. It turned out to be the most time saving. And then I ended up creating a handbook for I had faculty, and they actually used those templates. It was consistent, systematized. It was just a lot easier for giving, you know, when you know what questions normally your course is going to evoke. So I had a list of those, easy peasy. Hold virtual group sessions with small groups and whole groups as mini workshops with concepts students may struggle with. And again, you use that whiteboard. Hold virtual office hours to connect with students one-on-one. I was teaching at another college in Michigan, and we had a capstone, and students really struggled with that capstone. My first semester, I did not do that, and then I ended up doing it because they were struggling. They were so off base with those capstone projects. So by week 3, I was meeting with them. For me, I learned it was too long. Week 1, we set up those Zoom meetings, and I do it easy peasy quick. And I did it first a whole group, and we kind of went over the gist of the capstone and the key points. And then I did a one-on-one to solidify those ideas. Those were the best 15 to 20 minutes I spent with each student. As they were talking, I had my laptop up and I would take notes of their capstone, right? And what we discussed. As soon as we were done, copy, paste, email, here's your capstone that we talked about. So again, and that changed that entire culture of their work ethic. And again, not a lot of time. And with that capstone, I did it at the beginning, at the middle, and at the end. In a regular course, not as intense, I usually did it beginning and end. All right. So would someone like to share any thoughts about that section on community, how you may have set the stage, maybe what one of your takeaways might be from that, or how you might adapt it? Or maybe ways you have built community. So we'll look at the chat. Oh, I love that personal response. Yes. Oh, I love asking them what they want out of the class. Oh, these are wonderful. Anyone wish to share on that or give an example of what they've done in the class?
Hi, Dr. K.
Hi.
Hi. I also, what I meant by my post was I also like to, from the very beginning, let them know that, you know, showing up, hard work, and just being there and paying attention really pays off, and that I want each of them to do well. So I think just being super encouraging from the very beginning, letting them know I'm on their side. It's not going to be a rough ride. It's going to be a fun ride, and setting the stage for a really fun course. I like to start out that way.
Oh, I like that. Like the fun part, that it's not going to be drudgery, that I like. And I also really appreciate your sharing about the I'm on your side. That is something, again, for myself being so task oriented, I have to really be mindful of the fact that students do need that culture. And, you know, it was interesting when during that time, I had to take like a professional development of some type. It was like a 3-week for online structures. And I can remember thinking to myself, wow, I feel really stressed in this course. And that was a good reminder for me that that is how students feel. You know, it's so important to have that online presence, to have that feedback, to have that online support. Before I move on, anyone else wish to share? And I thank you for that strategy.
One of the things that I did that I changed, I'm teaching the 721 class, and it's just the students sit there very mute and they're trying to learn about the dissertation perspectives. Something I did in another class, and I'm going to do a version of it with this one, is I assigned students each week to lead the facilitation on that week's reading, and for them to focus on what they thought was important. And then I had my notes to add in and supplement. But one of the feedback I got was the students felt that they really learned more by leading the class. And it solved that dilemma of everybody just sitting there staring at me to do all the talking for 2 hours. It really got them engaged, and they were more apt to question their peers than me, even though I'm like, okay, question, anybody questions, I don't know if it's because, oh, I'm the professor, people felt they couldn't ask questions or challenge what I was saying, where with their peers, they had no problem doing that, and it really expanded the learning. So I use that a lot in my classes.
I love that. And in fact, I love that. In our first presentation, I actually shared one of my horror stories of my leader led, because I didn't prep it right, but I actually used that at a higher level as well. And you're right, they really responded well. For me, what I had failed to do was kind of set the parameter of, it was, oh, just lead the discussion. And they're all like, week one, what are we doing? There's no professor. What's going on? So I love that you kind of guided that process and then just let them take off with it. And I love, especially at a 700 level doc course, yes, they need to be facilitating those. That's a very appropriate level. And that's just one little footnote with what Cynthia brought up. Adapt, each strategy I'm just kind of throwing out there. Some strategies, again, you have to be mindful, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but being diagnostic about what level are you teaching and what's the primary purpose of your course. At a doc course, that's extremely appropriate. At an introductory level, that might not be as inappropriate of a strategy. They might be a little bit more nervous and it might have to be modeled. I love that idea. Okay, the third outcome is setting dialogue by modeling discussion expectations, modeling posts, modeling posting expectations, and modeling feedback to peers. And again, for me, at first when I started, I thought, well, they're adults, they'll do this. Modeling now has become a critical cornerstone to my pedagogy. Modeling along with scaffolding, those are my two best friends, and rubrics, but those are based on the modeling and scaffolding. And I make up fictitious, whatever's kind of going on in my life. Like at the time I wrote the MED, I had this crazy Belgian Malinois dog, puppy. And so I was doing a lot of training. So all of my fictitious stories or posts or writing were always about dog training, and I made up research about it. The modeling is very powerful, I believe. It helps, again, lower cognitive dissonance and anxiety, and help students see, okay, this is what the post has to look like. And I always use sophomore content because I want them to pay attention to the structure of the post, not the content of the post. I don't want my post replicated, right? So I would make something up and that would be my post. And again, if it's a course I taught, I save those. So I had a file of those. So it's the modeling, the discussion post itself, modeling posting expectations, modeling feedback to peers posts. So I'm not going to read this. Again, there's a link, but I found a lot of information about how to formulate or format kind of expectations for modeling posts and what should be in a post. And again, we're not going to read all of these. This was taken from discussion boards, loomlearning.com. And then one site, I actually found one article. She actually posted different like examples of posts, like they were actual posts. So students could diagnostically look at those posts and say, were these good posts or not? And they actually, on that website, created a video of how to actually post a discussion post. Again, my feeling is if you do it up front, you don't struggle with it all semester long. It can be easy peasy, 5 minute in and out. You could even do a quick mini lesson. You could even post a mock discussion board and have students analyze the 3 posts that you've created, why one's good, how they would grade it based on the rubric you give them. It could be a week 1 activity to set the stage for the rest of their post. Modeling posting expectations. So I found you have to provide clear posting expectations. And I looked a lot under the cluster posting, and I'm sure some of you have experienced that. I know I have, where a student is not engaged at all for the first 5 days, and then the last 2, they're posting like crazy to everybody's post. You know, good job, Jane, great post, John. So some of the suggestions I found under that were having students create their own posting schedules, have students graph or chart their posting patterns. Again, just to make them mindful that discussion boards are meant to be an online dialogue, not just a kind of bulletin board of this is my idea, now I'm going to leave. And that's, again, that to me is about that building community as well. And then modeling feedback to peer posts. So one of the things I struggled with in that MED, you know, I would ask them to give them feedback about those proposals, and it would be like, oh, I liked your proposal. Oh, okay, it's nice, but that's not feedback. So modeling that feedback, I found a 3C and Q model: compliment, comment, connect, and question. And again, the links are all included. And again, you can adapt for your course or create your own models. But I think frameworks are very important for students. I think frameworks for writing, frameworks for discussion. I used a lot of frameworks when I was building the MED. I used a lot of frameworks. I think it kind of, for me, it gives students kind of a funnel for their cognition, so they can at least go in the direction for their ideas that they need to go and still express themselves in a way that's meaningful. And then this was just a template for the 3C and Q. And again, you could model or create or adapt your own. For me, I would think this would be a week 1 quick post, and then have, you know, do my own and have students model that. So thanks for sharing. I really liked, I agree with you about, next time you should, I disagree because, I connect with you about, or a question, and we'll talk a little bit about questions in a bit. Okay, so that was SLL3, and I think for Evelyn, how are we on time? I think it's, let me see. Oh, I've got to move forward, but I would like to take maybe 1 comment or 2 about SLO3 if there is. Anyone care to share about an adaptation or something they might implement? Okay, we'll move on, and hopefully if you have something at the end, we'll also discuss it then. This is setting the stage for engaging dialogue by holding a discussion mini lesson. And again, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, I've got so much work in my course right now. I'm not talking 3-hour lesson. I'm talking like half hour in, you're out, it's with the group, you're done. And I did it by the discussion groups. You can do one, I gave 2 examples here. One is the self-reflective building community lesson. The other is the self-reflective flesh reading score, a reading e-score lesson. And I'm not going to go over those in depth. The first one, you can hold a quick Zoom meeting with each group and at the launch of the semester to get students to think about their role in online discussions. Mini lesson could be 20 to 30 minutes long via Zoom and recorded, so then you can post that recording to the group. Again, I like it easy peasy, 20 minutes. I would probably introduce one of those templates. I would probably then introduce my template filled out as a student. I'm the student, and they grade me and assess me based on that rubric, and then have a discussion about that. And these are just some examples of some I found of the mini lesson. Why is it important to share online content? How can I contribute to my personal learning community? How can I be a digital leader and positive digital citizen? And then this individual posted a quick little video. Videos less than 2 minutes, 3 minutes maybe, 4 if you're lucky. And then reflective questions. I would use those and zoom around that. That would be one quick, easy peasy. The second one is the Flesh Reading E-score. I found this, and they can actually analyze their own posts according to how readable they are. So that actually is really good, especially if you're doing some type of writing course or based in writing, or they need to be able to write, you know, like the doc courses or the grad level, even at the undergrad level with some of those essay type courses. And there's actually, it's a step-by-step model, and I included the link at the end. And again, easy peasy, each group, 20 minutes. I would probably post one and let them diagnose it with that Flesh Reading E-score, and it would be my post. And I would make like a good post and a not so good post, and then have them discuss it, applying that. And again, it gives the history of it, and it just talks about how they can score it. And there's a link provided as well. And for time, I'm not going to go through the details, but you'll have access to the PowerPoint. But I think that kind of also shows students that sometimes you can analyze self-reflective through use of data as well. So any comments about SLO 3 or 4? Or anything you'd like to share? Okay, let me just go in, looking. Go over these at the end too. Oh, I like found challenge to adjust, yes. Oh, I like the hours, the office hours. Yes, they are very busy, and it is hard to get them into small breakout groups. And what I would suggest as well is that recording, if you're online, that recording feature is really good, because then they can watch it still live and they can still stay tuned to the class. I like the email tips. Wow, these are some, oh, thanks. Saw the compliment, thank you. And I haven't had coffee yet. Good suggestion about the rubrics. Oh, I just want to, well, we'll address that in a minute, but you can also, if you're doing writing, I saw that about the rubrics. I actually, the courses in the MED were preset as well. I actually would just create my own writing frame, and I would post that as part of the assignment. Those writing frames worked enormously well, and I correlated it to the rubric. So I literally had Roman numeral 1, introduction, and then I described, this is what I'm expecting here and how many pages. Now, some might think that's spoon feeding. I think I don't want their cognition spent on figuring out what I want. I want their cognition spent on the research and the content. I found in the MED that worked very well. And I'll try to get through those chats at the end as well. Okay, so the SLO 5, recognizing how to set the stage for engaging dialogue using questions. We covered a little bit of this in the first session, but I do want to go over it again briefly. You can engage students by using questions, Bloom's taxonomy, the Socratic method, or probing questions. And we'll just go over each quickly. Bloom's taxonomy can be used to elevate and increase participation, and you can actually level the question to the level of Bloom's. So this is good if you want to address your course outcomes and you want to make sure you're addressing your course outcomes. You can use the discussion boards to do that. So you can base it in knowledge. What is the purpose of? What events influenced? Or understanding. So in your own words, what do you think? What does it mean to? Or application. Where else might this apply? Or analysis synthesis. What are the important elements to? I think oftentimes the discussion boards, it's kind of like for me, when I first started teaching, it was kind of the forgotten, oh yeah, I have that discussion board. What I realized was that discussion board can also address a lot of my SLOs, and I can supplement that. The discussion board was kind of where I had a little bit more wiggle room to kind of enrich whatever content was there, or kind of use it as a mini lesson, if you will, for the writing or something that they were struggling with. I could add value to that. And I included the links for these as well. And then evaluation for Bloom's. What approach would you choose and why? Can you evaluate this idea in terms of? And then the Socratic method, clarification. Why do you say that? How does this relate to our discussion? Probing assumptions. How can you verify or dispute this? I think a lot of times students, I have found in my teaching, it has to be modeled for them what it means to have conflict. Conflict is an important part of discourse. And I believe that's an important skill that has to be utilized and acquired. And I think in academia, we're fortunate, our conflict is always grounded in research. And that's what I try when I'm teaching those higher level courses to instill in students, that it's perfectly okay to agree to disagree. And it's really important to whatever your position is that you have grounded it in research. Probe reasons, what would be an example of? Probe viewpoints, what is an alternative? Probe implications, what generalizations can you make? Question about the question, how does this apply to everyday life? It was one of my favorite questions from students. How does this apply to, and there is an application. So I think that, again, posting these, and as you know, when you teach a course often, for me, I just kept a file of everything and collected it. So as I taught, I was like, oh yeah, I have this, or oh yeah, I have that article, or oh yeah, I can ask this question. And it made it a lot more systematized for me. And then the probing questions. Oh, yeah. So probing are designed to encourage deep thought. Do you feel that is right? What does this remind you of? What might be your biggest fear? How do you know this to be true? So in that mini lesson with the discussion, I would actually create 3 fictitious posts from 3 fictitious students, right, in that little Zoom, have them use our criteria to analyze it in some of those methods. They could even use that flesh score, and then have them play the role of the instructor with these questions. I would ask them, what types of questions would you ask the student and why? So any comments or questions about SLO 5, the questioning? And I know I'm moving kind of quickly. I'm running out of time, so I apologize. All right, well, SLO 6 is by being diagnostic, we engage students. That is part of my own practice. I consider myself a diagnostic practitioner. So I try to be diagnostic in my approach. I like to look at when things don't work in curriculum, what I work backwards in my mind and think, what aspect am I not covering that did not allow that student to be successful? Now, I'm going to put a footnote there with an 80-20 preference. There are some students, I will admit, I never reached. I tried to get them to write. I tried to get them to engage. I'm not going to say it's always been sunshine and flowers. For me, my mind, it's like an 80-20. I want to reach all. If I can move that 20, even a couple of feet, I'm really thrilled. But for me, I try to be diagnostic and ask myself, is it my organizational management online? Is it my instructional management online? Or is it my content management online? When there is a problem that students are having, and it's many students having the same problem, I have to go back in my head and say, okay, was it organizational? Organizational meaning, did I set the task up right? Did I set the timing up of the task right? Did I set everything they need in place where they're not looking for resources? Is my whatever I posted organized in a way that makes sense and is meaningful? If it's instructional, I have to ask myself, did I give valid feedback that correlated to the rubric? Was the feedback modeled and specific so they understand what I'm trying to tell them about their writing? Just using writing as an example. Content would be, did I provide the content they need to be successful with this task? And that could be me doing a little mock content, a little case study, and then engaging students by applying resources. So again, diagnostic, that's my approach. It's multifaceted. It's very reflective. Is it organizational management? How is my environment organized? And that does increase learner motivation. If students know you're there, they know it's time on task, it's that you are available. I have found it creates that really meaningful culture. Instructional management, am I presenting things in a way that support the variety of learners and learning styles? And then content management, is it presented in a way that is really relevant and meaningful? As you can see just during this presentation, I share a lot of my mistakes. I do that with my students too when I was teaching in ed courses, and I taught prior to higher ed, K through 6. I had a lot of mistakes that I could share with them, that I felt those AFCOs that I felt they could learn from and take the content and apply to. And then I just provided, and I'm not going to go through this, but oh my gosh, Stanford has this website called Classroom Resources, and it's literally diagnostic. You can put in what you're struggling with, and then it provides you articles and examples of the practice. And I'll show you what the page looks like. Yeah, this was like, I was lost here for a long time. Like, oh my gosh, there was so much here. What I try to do for myself is, so I don't get overwhelmed, is I pick one area that I'm struggling with. I try to do one area a semester. That's it. Now I teach my course, but if there's one area for me I need to change, I just choose one. That's what I focus on. And then the next semester I try to implement that change. That way for me, it sticks. If I try to do it all at once, it's not going to stick. So literally you click on what it is you're looking for. They have a scroll bar at the top and the problem you're having. And it actually gives you research and then promising practices, they call it. And I love that. And that's at Stanford. It's included in the PowerPoint. The second example I found was Wiley Online Resources. And they had, again, a lot of diagnostic articles and example practices. And this was just one. This was 5 ways you can increase engagement. And again, I like it. It's brief, it's concise. I don't have to spend an hour looking at it. Okay, and then I'm going to close this. I think that's it. Just Q&A. So I'm going to stop. I think my share now, unless someone wants me to go back and. Okay. All right, so let me stop that. There we go. And I want to look at some of these comments, but first I want to take any comments or questions. And I know, Evelyn, are we over? Are we good?
No, we're good. We're good.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay, so would anyone like to add or to comment or have questions for me? And I'm going to try to kind of get through this chat too.
Yes, I have a question, Dr. Jane. So it is really a very interesting and valuable information that all of us need. I have a question on the last SL06 about the content management. So I don't think this is in the faculty's hands. Once we have already developed syllabus, developed discussion question, how we can just do any changes. So is there a way that we can do any modification, or even I understand we can through our feedback that we get to the student, but in general, this should already designed syllabus.
Yes, and that's a perfect point. I'm so glad you brought that up, because at many of the colleges I have taught at, they are kind of packaged already, and they get pushed out and that's it. What for the perspective I was explaining is when you add supplements, I use the discussion board for that. So I'm going to give you an example, okay? Let's say one of the writing tasks in a course I'm teaching on dog training, I'm going to use my dog. I have another puppy. I'm crazy with these dogs. So and it's another crazy one like my last one who passed. So they have a dog training essay that they have to write, okay? And they have to ground 3 training methods in research. And the content is written where it just says, write an essay grounding 3 training methods in research. As an instructor, I taught that class last semester, and I knew they didn't do well with that task. They had no, what I call the scaffolding, right? The staircase that builds up to that platform. I would then utilize posting some type of discussion, like a post about a mock how I would analyze a training for a dog, I would post that to scaffold that skill. So I can't change the content in the exact course. However, I try to utilize the discussion and my announcements to, if I have to, scaffold that task so I know the learners will be successful. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And that's a very valuable point. I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of content now is preset, which is nice in a way, because it's like, okay, it's there. But then in another way, you know, curriculum is a fluid process. It looks beautiful on paper. And then you go in and you're like, oh my gosh, this is not what I anticipated. Plus your learning group can be different. One group, I have phenomenal writing. The next group, oh my gosh, what's happening? So I use those as opportunities to then, I diagnose it. Okay, this is a scaffolding issue. And then I find those resources to scaffold, so then they can be successful in that task without changing that content. Thank you for that question. Any other questions or comments?
I am putting on the chat, as usual, two links that are important for you to complete. One with feedback from this session. There's so much to talk about discussion questions and how we can engage our students. And it's such a big part of our courses, because that's where most of the conversation takes place. We meet students 2 hours or 3 hours a week, but students should be engaged the whole week on gaps. So thank you so much, Dr. Coco, for facilitating this wonderful, wonderful session. I want to share my screen. I'm excited that we have 53 people, so this is so good. We have a big audience. I want to share my screen for a sec.
I'm sorry, just one question. Is it okay to, I see a couple of questions in the chat. Before you move on, can we just address those? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I see, do you find there's certain students not getting the material no matter how hard you try to help them? Oh my gosh, be still my heart. Yes. So what I try to do in that situation is I do try to do a one-on-one, and then I try to provide as much structure with their work as possible, and scaffolding, and then resources like student services, writing. In the MED, the writing was so challenging. We had a writing center. Eventually, we developed an online writing center, and I would actually meet with them and refer them if that were the challenge. The videos, there's a lot of good videos that use the whiteboard. I would try to post resources to them personally to try to help them along. Yes, there are students I can't reach. I'm not going to say I've reached everyone. So that's a very good acknowledgement. Oh, and I think that's all of it.
Okay, well, thank you so much again for facilitating this session. We have to wrap up. I knew it when I read the presentation. I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be good, because we face discussion questions every day, and it's something that we need to find ways to engage students, because the reality is that there are some courses in which students just copy and paste, or it doesn't feel like they're really engaged online. So thank you so much for those tips, and I hope you have the chance, so any faculty has a chance to put them in practice and see how it goes. I don't want to leave this session without inviting everyone to the next session. So we're going to, I will be sending, we're just finishing the PD2Go newsletter. It will be completely dedicated to discussion questions and engagement online. So I will be there sharing the recordings from today, the PowerPoint presentations, and it will be also available on GAP, on the PD 101 course that we have. So, but I also want to invite you to the next session. Next month, we're going to move on, and we're going to continue the conversation on how to deliver effective and meaningful sessions for our students. And we're going to be talking about social emotional learning, and we're going to discuss constructive ways to deal with emotions to be able to succeed in the classroom.